This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. All right, welcome everybody to the Bluecollar Bodybuilding channel. I'm here with my good friend Amy. Amy, how you doing?
Hello. I'm good, Dave. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a good time to talk to you. If you haven't had enough of me on Sundays, you get me here today on a Friday.
I love
That's
it.
all right. So Amy and I were going to jump into a topic today about basically just kind of a real general discussion on digestion. Something that Amy's quite a expert at is digestive issues, and she's done a great job with kind of helping me and kind of contributing to the show with Paul quite a bit on the topics of digestion and just common food problems that people come about with bodybuilding. It's something that I've had issues with in the past, is some digestive issues, and it's something the more I start to learn about it, I start to realize how much more there really is to learn about digestion. It's not just a very cut and dry scenario. It's not very easy to kind of identify some issues with digestive problems. And so it's been something I've always been curious of. It's something that's, for certain competitors I've coached over the years, can be the only thing that holds them back is their digestive issues when it comes to how much progress we get or not. So I figured nobody better than yourself to kind of talk about this. And Amy's got a great presentation we're going to kind of jump into shortly, and just kind of free ball it and see what we can come up with to educate people.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. I mean, as a nutritional therapist, we very much what I, base everything around when I work with clients is, using food as medicine, or using food as the foundation. So if you can't digest anything, or if your digestive system's not working from the top down, which is what I kind of wanted to go over in the presentation, there's a lot of areas that things can kind of get off track. But people tend to not start at the top and work down, and then they're just constantly chasing things.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning, one thing I've learned really quickly with digestion in general is that it's kind of like a moving scenario. Like what's worked for some people and some competitors when it comes to like food selections or things that might have bothered them in the past is constantly changing.
Yes.
I can tell you for myself, stuff like as basic of how often I eat red meat is now kind of dictated by how well I digest it at the time. And stuff like Jackie's had, my wife, for example, has had issues in the past with egg whites, where she used to be able to eat them all the time and then started getting a little bit of a intolerance to them. So we had to eliminate those from her diet, slowly reintroduce them. And just kind of reminds me that when you think you know what works well for you, it definitely can be ever changing. And same thing with my clients. It's something that we just got to pay attention to because it's never really set in stone. So I think that's worth mentioning as well. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're living organisms, right? And I think that we very much, especially as bodybuilders, understand that we need to, continue to progress our training over time. But our diet and as our lifestyles change, and just as things change in our lives, like nutrition is something that is like you said, it's ever evolving, or it's ever progressing with us. And it's easy to get kind of stuck with nutrition, especially as bodybuilders. We do like our routines, so it is an area where we can get very, very stuck in the good and the bad.
Yeah, we get stubborn where we like you say, we get used to what we like to do, and we just keep hammering it into the ground till a small problem becomes a big problem. So hopefully with our talks today, we can kind of at least paint a picture for people so they can kind of see ahead when a problem's starting to arise, and then just kind of how to possibly identify them, and hopefully have an easy route first that might work for solutions for some of these problems we're going to talk about before we have to really get into the dive deep, really look for, because some of these things, like I mentioned, are not, at least to me, not the easiest to always identify. They can be difficult. But yeah, why don't we pull up Amy's presentation, and we'll just chat on things as we go along. But it's funny that you mention, let's see here. Is this the first slide?
It is. Yep.
Okay. But quickly, I'll mention, I like that you did add in food as our medicine, because there's quite a few famous quotes on that one as well. But I'll let you go ahead, and I'll hop in when I can here.
Yeah, there absolutely are. And that's where it starts, right? All disease begins in the gut. This is ancient wisdom right here.
Mhm.
And, food should be our medicine and medicine should be our food. So these are things when that's all we had to work with, I think we fundamentally as human beings understood far more that input and output equal each other. What we were in could directly affect what was coming out. And it seems that we've gotten farther away from that, but really that's so true. We are, especially as bodybuilders, we are being built by what we're putting in, and it should be our very first, the
Yeah.
basis of everything. It's the bottom of the pyramid, meaning it's the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
In my
Well, we
mind.
talk about it as being with the old expression that food's the actual brick and mortar that we use to grow, and then all the other facets are, our trainings, our blueprint, and, the anabolics can be the, another ingredient, the hammer and nails and such, so it's true. We have to have these things in place, and the better quality we have of foods, that definitely helps as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I have this slide you guys will see twice. This one is the 5 things that bodybuilders get wrong. And I put it in twice because I kind of want to start off with the things I see specific to bodybuilders and then kind of go through the basics of digestion. And then we'll talk about these again at the end, more so for the solutions. But the very first thing that I see bodybuilders and humans in general get wrong is eating in a sympathetic state, meaning your body is not in rest and digest. It is in a very sympathetic state, or you're eating too fast, not chewing, or a combination of all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's if that's where you're starting from, like, this is a bad place to start from. Next
Yes.
after that would be the meal timings. And I call this the magic of the MMC, which is the migrating motor complex, because we have to give enough time in between meals. But I'm sure you see this with your clients, Dave. If you're going too far between meals, that can also bring up issues of its own. So
Yeah.
getting that timing right is also really key for helping your body be ready to eat and ready to digest, and actually getting the most out of that food, eating
Yeah.
it at the appropriate time specific to training.
Yeah, and also just finding a routine so the body starts to expect those timings, so that
Mhm.
way hunger continues to match and stuff like that. It's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Over restricting and being with food selections. This is something that like I said, I see this, with a lot of people who have over restricted not the quantity of food, but the types of food. And then you get to this place where you've cut out so much in your diet, or your diet is so limited to just a couple of food choices. That is not great for a lot of reasons also.
Yeah.
The diversity of your gut is going to suffer, like everything's going to suffer when you're eating this and again, bodybuilders are stubborn, and I've been there too. Like, you get in this, like, these foods work for me, this is all I'm going to eat. That can really add to problems,
Right.
especially when you start having problems and you're only eating 5 foods, and then you cut out one of those 5 foods, and it can put you in a very bad place.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also look at things,
Changing.
a quick one to add, just be things on, enjoying your diet. The more restricted
Mhm.
you put yourself, the quicker you're going to get sick of foods, the harder it's going to be to adhere to diets. You want to have selections rather than feeling kind of locked in place.
Yeah.
But yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, absolutely. Changing everything at once or adding everything at once. That you hear, and this is again, this is the bodybuilders, right? We all hear about something, like, oh my gosh, it's zinc carnosine. This is it. This was going to fix everything, or I'm going to start doing all these supplements. So when you change everything at once or add everything at once, you have no idea what actually might be helping and what actually might be hurting. And then you go back to the old over restricting. Well, then you're just going to take everything away. I'm going to go low FODMAP. I'm going to go antihistamine. And then you're eating these 4 foods again, and your diet is boring and you hate it. So,
Yeah.
all these problems stack on each other. And then the last one I put is expecting issues. And this is true of bodybuilders, but it's also true, of just people in general. Like, when you are expecting problems, you tend to find them.
Yep. Very true.
And you don't always need to expect them, and I'll talk about why more, like the mental side of that is important too.
Sure.
Like I said, these all kind of these all can stack on top of each other and also just lead to a vicious cycle of chasing all these things.
Sure.
You're right. Like, so why digestion matters is, of course, you are what you digest, not what you eat. What you're putting
Mhm.
in is only good if you're actually digesting it. And I think there is well, I'll wait till the next couple slides where we're looking more at the anatomy, but the three things here, that digestion is the foundation of health. Like I said, it's the base of everything. It enables us to absorb nutrients. This is where we have energy production, and waste elimination all happens through digestion. And it impacts everything from our skin to our sleep to our immune system. Like, everything is impacted by the digestion of the foods we're intaking. You can have the best diet on paper with all the
Mhm.
superfoods on earth and everything is perfect, but if you're not digesting it, it's not working,
Yeah. Very true.
and you're not
Very
going to get
true.
the benefit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So digestion is very much a north to south process, and I have some anatomy pictures where we'll talk about this more, but it's a directional cascade. So it starts in the brain, ends with elimination, and each step prepares for the next.
Mm.
And you've probably heard before that, your digestive system is outside your body, that the food you're intaking is, never inside you and it's outside you. But it's not really true, because when we look at this, the way you're getting food into your system is by the breakdown through the digestion, but then it's getting absorbed through the intestinal tract so that things can go out. We've all heard of leaky gut. Things can also
Mhm.
get in. So it's true and it's not true, that
Mhm.
we're eliminating parts of ourselves. Stuff that comes out in our fecal matter and our waste is also, dead blood cells, or the components of all the tissues that our body is making. It's not, that's kind of a fallacy that I wish people would like stop saying. Yeah, it is a closed system, but
Sure.
it also kind of isn't. If it
Sure.
was, we wouldn't actually grow. We wouldn't be getting
Yeah.
anything out of food.
I
So,
understand the expression, but yeah,
right.
that I still say the same thing, that GI is internal. Yeah. I
Yeah.
get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird fallacies with digestion, or thoughts. But we see here the parts of digestion are gonna, like I said, they start with our brain. They're starting before we even eat food. It includes, the things that happen in the mouth. Very key things for digestion happen before we even eat food. The signaling that our brain gives to the rest of our body is what prepares us to eat. That's that eating in that parasympathetic state. We're in a
Mhm.
rest and digest state. It means that we're producing the right salivary enzymes to help start that breakdown of food. Specifically, carbohydrate breakdown happens a lot in the mouth. We're chewing food correctly, using those muscles of mastication, and then when things get into the stomach, our stomach, I always tell people, the stomach doesn't have teeth. It moves through, it does have an ability to kind of move and massage food. But really, once the food is out of your mouth, everything else that happens down the line is primarily happening through enzymatic and chemical digestion. So
Mhm.
we have that one opportunity to chew our food correctly. After that, it's all up to, the ability of our body to have the right enzymes to break things down, and the right pH to actually, break things down effectively. And then, of course, things go through the large intestine, or the small intestine, large intestine, and then get eliminated, the parts that we don't need. And I think I have a bigger picture too, yeah, just showing the different parts. We got pancreas, gallbladder, all these things that are kind of adding in what they need to when they need to add it in. It just kind of shows a better picture of it. We
Yeah,
don't all look
definitely.
at pictures of anatomy all the time, right? You kind of forget.
Oh, it's
Where's
good.
all
I'm
this
I'm a
stuff?
visual learner for the most part, so sometimes seeing this, it's kinda like myself and my other jobs growing up. When I did a lot of mechanic work, I had to just see how things operate, and it would give me a better understanding of how to go about asking questions and how to really visualize the fixes of things when I can
Yeah.
see how they're interworking together. Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool.
Which that always kind of, when people will say like, oh, my stomach hurts, I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah,
your actual stomach, or are you having like lower intestinal pain? Like, but we kind of just say like anything that, like, again, anything that's like past the mouth, we're like, oh, it's my stomach,
yeah.
but is it really? So identifying like where this is, there's
Everything's
a
a
lot
belly
going
ache.
on.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, step one is going to be our brain and our mouth. So brain starts to signal digestion. It's telling the body that to expect food, that food is coming. These include things, like smelling, seeing, thinking about food. Starts to trigger saliva. I mean, we've all seen, our dogs are a great example of this. They're smelling food and they're just drooling like crazy, right? Because
Right.
their brain is anticipating food. And we're very much that same way.
Mhm.
Chewing breaks down the food, mixes it with enzymes. So there's the people who like were religious who will pray, there is something to be said for that. Again, getting into that state where you're telling your body, like, it is time to eat.
Sure.
We're going to smell the food. We're going to take a moment, let our bodies kind of have that little bit of time to shift into like eating mode is really beneficial, to kind of
Yeah.
start that process.
Yeah, and I was going to save this point towards the end, but this is a good time to bring up is when you first talk about the 5 steps there that you showed on one of the first slides. We talked about the sympathetic timing of eating and the importance of that. And we see that a lot in bodybuilding. That's something a bodybuilder is going to have to identify and want to identify quickly, if to help with their digestive system, where it's almost more natural for the everyday person. They just get hungry, they eat. They're not hungry, they don't eat. They kind of can follow those scenarios. Well, with bodybuilding, there's going to be a lot of times you're going to be eating when you're not hungry, and there's going to be a lot of times you're not eating when you're starving. Now, the parasympathetic thought process really kind of, to me, is something I address with my clients frequently, right? Because they'll have, let's just say something, we'll use me as an example. I usually get 4 of my 6 meals in before my training session, and they all go very well. But after my training session, it depends. If I had kind of I don't want to say easier day, but less CNS kind of damaging kind of day, a less difficult day from the point of my CNS system, where, like, let's just say it's an arm day or a chest day, which is kind of fun and easy, compared to a leg day, I'm not quite as prepared to eat after these more difficult training sessions as I usually would, or at least being on time for what I want on paper. So a lot of the times I'll instruct my people and myself, I'll just kind of wait. I'll come home and maybe I'm a half hour behind, 30 minutes behind on when I would like to eat my meal, but the receptiveness and the enjoyment of the meal, and I can feel that meal agreeing with me by, instead of just sitting right down and eating, maybe I'll just go take my shower, do a couple quick chores around the house. 30 minutes goes by, and now I'm hungry. Now I'm kind of ready to rest. That has passed that CNS kind of sensation of being wired in fight and flight mode. So it's pretty important. And a lot of the times, you get your brain telling you when it's time to eat more than your clock, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh,
So there's something to
absolutely.
be said by that, because I'd imagine the brain's going to signal for me to have saliva, going to start producing those enzymes a little more, just again, be receptive of the food and, agreeing with pulling in the nutrients rather than forcing something to happen in my body that it's not ready for.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
And, you said, as bodybuilders, we also spend a lot of time not eating when we are hungry, and
sure.
so there is a mental component of, in our society, we spend most of the time in a fed state, but are you really going to starve to death? No, we're
Right.
doing something by choice. And sometimes it is, for me as a competitor, reframing those times when I'm really hungry is just taking that moment to, like, even if you're really, really starving for that meal, rather than just like digging into it like like a crazed bikini competitor that I am, taking that moment to just like take a few deep breaths,
Yes.
like the revert, it's the same thing, like just
Yeah.
making sure that, like, okay, like, yeah, I'm going to eat this food. I'm going to be hungry later. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be fine.
But enjoying the meal's big, and then
hmm
that's just going to encourage you to chew it more, emulsify your food more, and usually, probably put yourself in a better position to absorb all those nutrients. So it's not just a matter of curbing hunger, but also fueling and receiving the nutrients we need in that meal, especially when they're limited,
Absolutely.
sometimes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the, next step after food has left our mouth, like I said, after that, there's no teeth. Everything that's happening after this is happening through primarily, digestive enzymes. So in the stomach, we're getting HCl or hypochloric acid and pepsin. So starting to break things down with that. Protein digestion begins in the stomach. The other really important thing that happens in the stomach is that pathogens are killed. So,
Mhm.
you'll, like, you've probably been there, right? You go out to eat, everybody eats the same thing. Everyone except one person gets wicked food poisoning, or only one
Mm.
person out of the group does, but they all ate the same thing. Well, why is that? Well, a lot of that has to do with your body's ability to actually have the right pH in the stomach and the right amount of hypochloric acid to actually kill off. That's where some of this can happen.
Mm.
So, this part of digestion is really key. And again, this is not me telling everyone to start taking tons of HCl, right? This is not what I'm saying. Our body should be producing the right amount based on what we're feeding it and when we're feeding it. And again, being in the proper state at step one. So the chyme is basically, all this food now is being churned around in the stomach. It kind of does a massage type of movement, churns all this food together. It's bathing it in all this acid. And your stomach has two indicators to empty. There's a sphincter at the base of the stomach that's going to empty it into the small intestine. And that'll happen two ways. It happens when the pH is correct, and it happens by default if food has been in there too long. Your stomach, your body, your brain is going to be like, look, we got to get rid of this food. Like whether or not it's broken down or it's the right pH or whatever, we're getting rid of it. You've probably heard of people who have like dumping syndrome or things like that, where they're eating and they're literally passing like basically undigested food through their digestive system. Now it shouldn't work like that, right? Like that's a problem. So
Sure.
that's either a chemical problem or, something else is going on, that like that stomach or that your food has been in your stomach too long. It hasn't been broken down properly. Now it's being pushed through the small intestine. Well, the small intestine knows that this is not the right breakdown of stuff that we can do anything with. So it just forces it through, and you're very rapidly evacuating your bowels. So this is where the problems can start to happen, right?
Sure.
If we're not doing all these steps in the right way, problems can happen.
Sure.
In the perfect world, the food gets into the small intestine. This is primarily where your nutrient absorption is taking place. Your pancreas is now going to release enzymes that are going to help break down fats, proteins, and carbs even more. You're getting bile that's coming from the liver and the gallbladder, which is going to help emulsify fats. One of the main questions I ask people when we're talking about their stool or their the feces that is coming out is if they have floaters, right? Or if they see fatty, almost looks like an oil spill, around their stool. These are good indicators that they're not actually breaking down fats properly. So this is where we're starting to backtrack, where a problem might have begun because, again, when everything's working well, you're getting the right amount of bile, you're getting the right amount of pancreatic enzymes, it's breaking everything down, we're all good, right? And food is going to be absorbed through the walls of the small intestine appropriately. It's not going to be big chunks of stuff getting out into our system that's going to cause our immune system to go into overdrive. And anything else is going to continue on down the line. I have this little, slide here that shows everything that's kind of happening here. So we get our pancreatic enzymes, bicarbonate comes out at this point in time, which is going to help neutralize things to the right pH is very key. The stomach is extremely acidic because it's helping to break this down. We don't want that type of acidic base going into the small intestines. So this is where it's going to kind of cool down a little bit with some of these things. Liver detoxification, bile production, gallbladders releasing bile, like all these things are kind of happening all the time as food goes into the small intestine. Once we get to the large intestine, this is where our body's going to reabsorb water and electrolytes. There's still important vitamin and mineral production that happens or is absorbed through the large intestine. Also fermentation by gut bacteria. In a perfect world, we have a lot of diverse bacteria in our large intestine. We're learning a lot more about the microbiome, and also not just the microbiome of the large intestine, which is where we historically thought the only place that bacteria reside, but we're also learning that there can be, the microbiome of the small intestine is unique as well and changing all the time. But again, in the large intestine, things are fermenting. This is where we're getting some of our mineral and vitamin absorption, and then stool forms, and it's going to be eliminated. And again, all along the way, your body, the cells inside our intestinal tract turn over incredibly rapidly. So, dead cells are coming out through waste. There's a lot of other byproducts that are coming out through our waste as well. It's not just this leftover food. Your body is moving things through. I mean, even hormone, like all these little breakdowns and metabolites of things that your body is trying to eliminate are going to come out with your stool. So it is important that your stool is coming out regularly and formed well and is kind of catching all this stuff with it, to kind of help with all of your body's detox. It's not just about the food that's coming out.
Seeing consistency in your stool is a good sign. You want to see not consistently bad, but a consistency to, like you say, the makeup would be an easy indicator to tell. I have one question that's probably out of left field, and maybe this isn't the way to ask it, but how far would your meal be digested by the time it's reaching your large intestine? Does it sound like by the time we reach a large intestine and then move to the colon, 90% of the digestion's been taken place, or is there still a large process that has to be done in the larger intestines?
No, it, like you said, it should be well more than 90%. Like by the time things get into your colon or your large intestine, like the nutrient absorption part of digestion is nearly finished, but there are still
Okay.
some things that, vitamins that will convert in the large intestine, but most of it's done. That doesn't mean that every particle of food has to be completely like broken down to be eliminated. There are
Mhm.
definitely some things, like we know that are almost kind of, we eat them like our grandparents or parents probably called them like roughage, right? Something like kale. If you're eating a
Yeah,
lot of raw kale, even if you're chewing it incredibly well and all the pH and everything else is normal as it's going through,
sure.
your body's just only going to break it down so far. So like there's times when you might see like larger pieces of things like vegetables or something in your stool. But if you're
Yeah,
seeing a lot of undigested food in your stool, it's definitely an indicator that something's off. And that could be at the very top. That could literally, we might
sure.
have to go back to the very beginning. Maybe you're just eating, not chewing, and that's
Mhm.
the solution. Bodybuilders,
Yeah,
if you're passing whole chunks of rice,
yeah.
let's go back to the top.
So warning for everyone, of course, we gotta talk about, I always joke with Amy, we gotta talk about poop sometimes in bodybuilding, but the when you say it could go right back to the top, sometimes people see stuff like their berries that aren't completely not completely digested, and they're seeing it in their stool. That could probably go right back to the emulsification, the chewing of the food too, coming out somewhat whole. But I'm sure small intestines and when you're looking at the bile and you're looking at the stomach acid, that should also play a role. But step one, yeah, chewing some of these things is going to give you a good head start. So I think that's
And
worth
some of
noting
those things,
because sometimes you see stuff that comes out in your stool that's not always common. That might be part of your diet, and it could just be again right back to the chewing aspects or rushing that meal or passing whole berries once in a while or stuff like that. Which we've had people in check-ins tell us about it.
yeah,
So
and if it's a
yeah,
whole berry, that's a problem. But what you
sure.
can't, I mean, there are definitely parts of products that will not be digested fully, especially things like seeds, which
Mhm.
is why someone like Dave, you've struggled with colitis. You have to be really careful with some of those things, like popcorn. The
Yeah,
popcorn hull, can be very sharp, so it can cause like abrasion in the small intestine for people that have some issues there. But also, that's not really digestible. So your body's going to pass that through whole, like that
mhm.
piece of the hull. Also with seeds, there was there were some issues with the county or the city using like human waste byproduct essentially as fertilizer. And
Mm,
they were spraying it on the side of highways and they were having all these tomato plants growing
mm,
because again, you eat the tomato, but the seeds, if you don't completely break down that seed, it can
sure.
remain intact, be passed out through your stool and
Germinate.
sprout into yep, same
Yeah,
thing happened with berries. So there are
yeah,
some things that aren't going to be broken down, even if you're chewing them perfectly and have everything else perfectly. So context matters, but yeah, if you're pressing a whole berry, you got to
sure.
start thinking about what you're chewing or whole
Well, I
grains of
have,
rice.
yeah, no, I was aware of that with the seeds. I have, diverticulitis that I have to be
Oh, that's right. Diverticulitis, not
wary of.
colitis. Yeah.
But that same scenario, having parts of food getting caught in that area
Mhm.
is the big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and seeds are one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing I didn't cover on the anatomy slide super well, but the inside of our intestines is very wrinkly. It's lots of folds. There's lots of little spaces and things like that can get in those little creases and cause irritation, can be,
Sure.
cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah. So why digestion is crucial for health, like we've discussed, poor digestion means you get poor nutrient delivery. It's going to affect your hormones, your immunity, your detox, even your cognition. Like chronic issues can trigger inflammation and disease. Like Dave, like you said, like diverticulitis is an inflammatory process that's happening in the diverticulum. So
Mhm.
there's so much that can go wrong, that it's going to affect more things than just like the poop that's coming out. Even, these other things like our ability to actually detox our hormones properly. So if you're looking at labs, I'm sure that's something you look at, Dave, is like how much free versus how much available hormone is in a person's body. If they're not eliminating, or if their digestion system's not working well, like you might see those levels just be off for like, and you're like, why is this so off? And if you never talk to them about their digestion, you might be missing a critical part in like why things are looking the way they are. for
Yeah,
someone.
absolutely.
The big things that I see that can go wrong with digestion, we've got low stomach acid. Most people assume that they have too much stomach acid, right? We have like you look at the grocery store and you would assume that every person was walking around with like stomach acid just boiling out of their, stomach, because we have aisles full of antacids and proton pump inhibitors and all these things to address stomach acid, when more often than not, the issue is low stomach acid
Mhm.
versus it's hypochlorhydria versus hyperchlorhydria. Enzyme or bile insufficiency is another one. A lot of people think their gallbladder doesn't do anything. A lot of people have their gallbladders removed, and then it's, that's going to cause some digestive issues with breaking things down. We need our gallbladder to do its job at the right time.
Mhm.
Dysbiosis is a broad term for bad gut bacteria.
Sure.
We are learning a lot more about, the conditions that affect the small intestine, not just SIBO. We've got SIFO, there's yeast overgrowth. There's a lot of things that can happen when we have the bacteria getting out of whack. Leaky gut and just inflammation of the intestines, like you struggle with sometimes, Dave. And then
Mhm.
just kind of general stuff like bloating, reflux, IBS. These are all things that, each one of these things, I think this is where people kind of get to, especially these things lower down on the list. Gosh, once you kind of think you have IBS or you've got SIBO or something going on, like, man, you're in the quagmire of digestion at that point. And
Yeah,
this is where, again, I always go back to the top. We got to really look at digestion from the top down and not get quite so focused on just this one symptom, because all these things can be connected.
sure.
The gut-brain connection cannot be overlooked, for a very long time. And unfortunately, there are still doctors who think that IBS or irritable bowel syndrome is completely psychosomatic, that it has no actual physiological thing, that it's all in your brain.
Mm.
And for some people, that is probably very true. Our gut-brain connection is very strong. The vagus nerve directly connects those two things. So our gut is really our second brain via the enteric nervous system. It's very, very highly connected, and it has to be, because from an evolutionary standpoint, it's telling our body all these things. Are we getting the nutrients we need? Do we have energy? How are things going? Are we in the right state to actually eat, or should we be fighting?
Sure.
These things are all directly connected, and also stress does affect digestion. So if you're eating in a
Mhm.
very stressed out state, you're not going to be digesting well. If you're, constantly perseverating on digestive issues, you're also then going to probably not be digesting well. If you're always obsessed about bloating, like, they
Yeah,
can definitely start to add into each other, but I don't believe that they are that they never have a physiological cause. Like, I always think
sure.
there's something going on physiologically, but the brain, it's so powerful. You can't take the brain out of it, which is why, I really like people to be able to take a step back, take those maybe 4 or 5 deep breaths before you start eating. Sometimes that fixes so much, just
Yeah,
taking a few deep breaths before you eat, like, a lot of your
yeah.
digestive issues might go away.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's super true. Some bodybuilders, I'm not quite like that, but I've met many that seem to be a little hypochondriac to a point, and they kind of, how do they what's the word? Where they kind of metastasize the issues on, they get them to arise on their own, you know,
mhm.
um, so I like the fact that when we talk about this, we can actually, instead of thinking about just immediately being stuck in our own brain, jump into conclusions, we have some processes to kind of start from the top, as you say, work your way down, and really just start seeing where our biofeedback and the information we have can start leading us to the correct issues, rather than thinking we have a problem and then connecting it backwards and
Mhm.
falsely identifying things. So
Yeah.
there's that point too, because it happens. We're all human.
Oh, yeah.
We can tend to think the worst and make that come to fruition if we're not careful.
And those things, there are parts of those that they exist for very powerful reasons. Like, I think we all probably have some food aversion that is related to, for most of us, probably bad choices at some point as a young person related to alcohol. Like, you're like,
Sure.
I can, had a bad experience with this food, or you had food poisoning, and you had
Mhm.
food poisoning when you ate this one food, and like, you will forever avoid it.
Sure.
Yeah, evolutionarily, the only reason we found out that that mushroom killed somebody and that mushroom gave somebody a really fun time was by eating it.
Yeah.
Some of those things, they exist for a reason, but when we as a human or as a bodybuilder especially tell ourselves the story of like, "Oh, I can't eat X food because it causes me this issue." Well, then yeah. Like if you're telling your brain that over and over and over again, when you eat that food, it's going to be like, oh, no, we shouldn't eat this. This is bad. And then, yeah, you're going to have tons of symptoms.
Yeah.
Those things are real.
Yeah.
For me, I am in denial that I have an egg allergy. I wish I didn't. I just had a test again to see if I did, and I still come up with, even though it's a mild reaction, it's still a reaction. So I'm like, as much as I want to believe that doesn't exist, it does.
Yeah.
But the reverse works too.
Yes.
So this just basically is just showing again how the brain and the gut and everything is kind of interconnected here. There's so many nerve endings in our gut that are sending signals constantly back to our brain. So that the two are very connected. So if something's off in your gut, like it's going to start affecting other parts of your body, including your brain, your immune system, like all these things are going to start to be impacted. Specifically, we've heard that serotonin is primarily produced in the gut, and it is. And I got into a discussion. This is actually one of the AB lives that someone was kind of disagreeing with me. I'm like, there's two different things. So your brain does have its own serotonin. However, the bulk of the serotonin that is produced in the body is produced in the gut, 90 to 95%. But also, this is where you get your dopamine and your GABA and other chemicals that influence how you feel and think. Like it's pretty remarkable when you think about that. Hormones like ghrelin, leptin inform your brain about the gut, but they're coming from the gut. Those are gut hormones. They're not brain hormones. They're telling your brain things. They're not coming from the brain, which is fascinating.
Very good point.
A lot can go on with the gut, and there's just so much there. Just a kind of basic recap of how things, kind of impact this hormonal cascade also in the gut is that digestion is it really impacts every part of it. So if we have any part of digestion that's impaired, our hormonal production, our hormonal system, all these things are going to start to suffer. So making sure that we are having the proper cascade here, right? So we're eating correctly. We're got the right hormones coming at the right time. And those of us who have competed know how backwards these signals can get, especially at the end of prep. The ghrelin and leptin signaling can be so crazy because we've been hungry for so long.
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell to finally get our body back to that place where it feels kind of safe and isn't just like really ramping up that desire to refeed, to regain body fat. Those are powerful things that are coming from our gut. They really are. But everything else down the line, just making sure that we're actually breaking down things correctly, our gut microbiome, the production of estrogen, the metabolism of the estrogen and testosterone metabolites, it's clearing hormones from the body. Like all of these things are so important in just kind of how we feel overall. And, as bodybuilders too, we tend to be people who get in our own heads. And when you're in your own head and then your digestion's not working and your hormones maybe aren't working and you're also got all these big goals, you can just see how this can become this really crazy cycle of just struggling.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the more common things is, when you talk about ghrelin and leptin, diet adherence, it's one of the more difficult things right there is really not the food diversity. Sometimes it's not having as much food as you think you need and, experiencing the fullness sensations or when they're uncomfortable or just being overly hungry and experience ghrelin too quite a bit. So those things, if you're a bodybuilder, you've experienced them and they're very true and very pourpourul.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
hence the introductions and success of GLPs these days.
Right. Yeah. Having the ability to manipulate those signals is powerful. Yeah. So a couple of my basic tips to optimize digestion, starting with number one, chewing your food thoroughly and eating in a relaxed state. Those two things are going kind of hand in hand. Supporting your stomach acid if it's low, which it probably is if you're having issues, it could be low. Staying hydrated, but not excessively during meals. So spacing out your food and your water intake is really key. If you're chugging a ton of water, which again, those of us, especially who are, maybe cutting or on, toward the end of contest prep, just trying to make your stomach feel full, right? Get that sensation of fullness. You might be drinking a lot of water, but if you drink a lot of water and then you're putting all this food in, it's a lot for your stomach to kind of handle. And again, that pH is probably not going to be totally correct. It might end up sitting in your system too long. And it's just, then the problems start. So keeping your food and your water somewhat separated is a good idea. Including fiber and fermented foods and whole foods. And really, this is where I would also really stress variety of foods would be in this step too. Really making sure that you're getting some variety. in all of your food choices, not just in your vegetables and fruits, which I think people think when I say variety, like, oh yeah, I'll do different vegetables this week. But how about you switch up your protein sourcing? Like you mentioned, Dave, like how often you can consume red meat has somewhat changed, but perhaps like doing a different thing instead of just thinking that red meat has to be just beef or that, white meat has to be just chicken. There's a lot of other protein sources out there that we can try adding in when they're available, So mixing up all of your food sourcing and really keeping a diverse diet is so key. And this is, I guess if I give any advice to bodybuilders is just to increase the diversity of their diet. And don't be so afraid to do that. Our body, there are times when eliminating things is important and is a good step to kind of eliminate some triggers. But like I said, I see them people get stuck in this place where I can only eat low FODMAP for the rest of my life until I die, which is not the way that diet was intended. It was intended for a short like an elimination phase with a reintroduction. You want to give your body as many diverse things as possible because that's going to keep your gut healthy. I mean, the more we learn about the microbiome, the more we learn that diversity is what it really wants. The more diverse it is, the more healthy it's going to be. And we don't know what that perfect balance is, and it's different for everybody because there's bio-individuality there. But even things like coffee produce a very specific type of bacteria that's only found in the gut of coffee drinkers. So, all these things are important, and that's where, like I said, that would be my, aside from all that, chewing, being in a parasympathetic state, all those things are really important. But giving your body a diverse variety of foods is right up there at the top of the primary things I see that people could do.
Now, if you had to say why though, just kind of quickly, like a general, why is it that the gut biome thrives through diversity?
With diversity?
Yeah, is it just because that way you're feeding bacteria that aren't getting the practice or getting that you're just not keeping a gut diversity? How much is you keeping your bacteria diverse by having diverse foods? Is that what the goal is? Okay.
Yes. And it's about balance, and that's where if you cut out a food group entirely, let's say you have not eaten dairy in 20 years, and then you suddenly eat a lot of dairy. Well, yeah, you're going to have some digestive issues because your body hasn't had that challenge in a while. And I'm not saying you should, I'm not trying to, I just pick dairy as a one thing, but the same thing could be said of egg whites. Let's take egg whites. If you've been eating tons of egg whites and then you cut them out entirely and then you eat them again, you're probably going to have some gas because your body doesn't have that specific, bacteria in the intestines to help break those down efficiently. But if you're getting little bits of things more frequently with a broad diversity, you're just giving your body a better way to be able to handle all of these things because your bacteria in your gut is going to be more diverse. There's just going to be more to choose from. It's also going to help prevent one type of species from overwhelming everything else. When you're eating the same foods all the time, the bacteria that are there are, going to be able to handle those. But if one of those bacteria then starts to overtake the rest, even if it's a beneficial strain, like a commensal strain of bacteria, a good strain, it starts to overgrow all the others, then that's not good either. Right? Because then those other bacteria that you need to help break down something else they're getting pushed out.
Sure. So part of it is, the old, don't use it, you lose it. You don't use those bacterias. They're just not going to be available and prevalent. Yeah. Kind of like we all forget how to ride a bike once in a while, but it takes a little time and we pick it right back up.
Yeah.
I totally get why so that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And you think about too, across the world, the diversity of other diets and the things that people eat, our bodies are very adaptable. I think of a good example of this was years and years ago. I dated a guy he was stationed in Korea and went to a movie and he's like, there was this terrible smell. And you look behind him and there was a little kid, he said probably 2 or 3 years old, eating what he found out were dried squid legs. Was a popular movie theater thing there. And I don't think most of us would think that our 3-year-old would want to eat some dried squid if they'd never had it before. But, in another culture, that's a delicacy, that's a treat, so it just shows that our bodies will adapt to what we're giving it. And there's a lot to give it. So, keeping it diverse is going to keep it healthy.
Yeah. Okay. Now we got nutritional stuff.
Yeah, there are a few that I recommend starting with. And again, I'm not the type to start everything at once. So if you need it, maybe a little bit of digestive support through some digestive enzymes. I like to do bitters before meals. It's just something that kind of gets things going in the digestive system. Probiotics, I would much prefer prebiotics. I'd rather be getting those through food versus a supplementation, because again, if you're taking the exact same prebiotic supplement every day, well, that's it. You're just giving it that one thing, and it could, again, start to cause that imbalance to happen. So I
Mhm.
don't recommend supplementation long-term with probiotics. I'd much rather be getting some prebiotics through some fermented foods, a little bit of kombucha, those kinds of things. And then
Yeah,
HCl support, I say only guided by a practitioner, because this is something that there's a way to learn how to take it correctly versus just
okay.
taking it. And yeah, and starting one of these things at a time or a little bit
Yeah.
at a time.
No, that's definitely wise. And with a lot of my clients, we do practice fermented foods quite a bit, where I
Mhm.
can. And even just kind of preemptively, we'll try to put them in to have, get a couple different options that we can use. People enjoy kimchi. I enjoy that in my
Mhm.
meals. Like you had already mentioned, kombucha, sauerkraut, and but it's worth mentioning that you want to get the correct ones. If they're not, I believe, live cultured, or like as in they have to be refrigerated products. They're not
Yes,
going to work as well, or if at all, from what I understand. And
that's
so making
correct. Yeah,
sure
you don't
you're
want to, if they're like shelf stable, the bacteria in them are dead. So
yeah,
not pasteurized. You want them to not be cooked.
yes, that's what I was getting to. Yeah, they'll pretty much be not even worth it. They'll just be the flavor that someone might
Yep.
be going for. One thing I
Yep.
was going to ask you about digestive enzymes. I've always taken the approach of just getting high dose single enzymes that I'll use. So, like, instead of getting these blends of digestive enzymes, like I use the protease enzyme. I forget the name of the company. I think it's Transformation or something, but it's like 375,000 units, I believe. Um, I wish I had the bottle on me, but it's like 10 times higher dose than what you'll see in blends per
Yeah.
serving. So, I prefer that's the only time I've seen them actually aid in my digestion, is having more than the recommended doses, at least what you see in the blends. And I'll just usually add in the enzyme of choice that I need, that I feel that I need, or I feel that I've correlated, like, hey, I'm having a tough time with certain proteins. So I'm going to use a protein enzyme and just use that kind of higher dose specifically as needed. I'm not taking it every single meal, but I'll take them, like I use that one I just mentioned for some of the red meat meals. And if something's sometimes ground turkey, I need to use that as well. People think that digests pretty well, but it's a little rough for me. Um, and then the HCl I'll support. I just use kind of same thing. If I'll use that a lot of the times, just meal by meal if I need it. I'm not taking it every single meal. And then I add in my kimchi. I like my kimchi. I actually have a sriracha that's made out of fermented foods, and that works for me.
So Dave, you have to tell me more about this sriracha, this fermented sriracha, because I love
So
sriracha.
yeah, so you're not going to get a ton of. You're probably still going to need to add in like some kimchi or kombucha, to get the amount of
Yeah.
prebiotics that you're looking for. But where I can be one of those people that I use sriracha on every single meal some days. So, but it's basically it tastes like sriracha. It's just a little thicker. I'll have to send you the picture of the brand.
Yeah.
But I ended up just stumbling upon it at the store. Nobody told me about it. I got it and I said, hey, I'm gonna either buy sriracha or I'm gonna buy this kind. So might as well just put in a little extra prebiotics. And if I enjoy it, I think it was only like 50 cents more than the bigger bottles of the regular sriracha. So I enjoyed
Yeah.
it. It's a little bit of a vinegary. It's got a little bit more of like a sour taste to it because of the
Mm.
nature of what it's made of, but it's made from a kimchi blend, but it's excellent. I like it. It's definitely enjoyable. There's some meals I don't like putting kimchi on because the texture throws me off. Like I don't really care to put it in my fish meals. It's just too soft, the stuff
Mm.
going on. So I'll use that, or sometimes just on red meat, just instead of doing just do my salt and some sriracha, mix it in. It's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll send
Well,
it to you.
I would love that. And that's where that diversity code though could come from. And I think we all think that things have to be in a huge quantity to make a difference.
Sure.
Like specifically like fermented foods. A lot of times I'll tell people to do one spoonful of
Mm,
sauerkraut or one spoonful of kimchi or just a quarter of a bottle of kombucha, because again, if we start kind of, I see people drinking these like, huge containers of kombucha, and like, that's just,
Yeah.
again, like tons of those specific type of bacteria. So,
Yeah.
those little amounts, like that little bit you're getting, I mean, it's just something a little bit different. I mean, I think that's awesome. Like, that's what I'm like, I
Yeah.
love that. I love hot sauce. I love sriracha. So that
It's good and
sounds
good on
incredible to
eggs.
me.
Well, you can have
Yeah,
eggs, but it's good on eggs.
not on
Yeah.
eggs. I'm still trying to convince my body that I can't have eggs, but it does not agree.
Well, the way it goes, it sounds like maybe someday. You never know. It might be, you might be able to get a tolerance to it back.
Right.
Who
I, you know,
knows?
I I accept that I can do a little bit, and I really enjoy it when I do it. That's how I treat eggs.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
So again, I put this slide in here again because I did want to go over some of these things now that we've kind of seen like how digestion works from the top down,
Right.
why bodybuilders specifically get these things wrong, and where they could kind of hack them and adjust them.
Mhm.
Number one, you should be eating in a parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
Right? But at the beginning, I said eating in a sympathetic state because that's what most bodybuilders are doing. They're eating too fast. They're not chewing. They're just stressed out. They're just trying to shovel it in, right? How many times, Dave? I'm sure you've heard it with your clients too. Like, well, I just have to shovel it in. Like, yeah, I get sometimes we have to eat when we don't want to, but that's then that cascades down into meal timings. Are we just shoveling food in any second we get and we're not really thinking about it? Are we giving our body a chance to actually digest the previous meal before we're stacking the next meal right on top of it? And I know that sometimes when you're really pushing food, that's not going to always be the case. But again, this isn't an ideal world. Over restricting, why that's not a great idea, why we need to keep a diverse diet, keep a diverse microbiome. Your body should be able to handle these foods. And, if you've
Mhm.
cut out so much, again, I go back to FODMAP is just the one that a lot of people tend to go to. They hear it and they're like, oh, yeah, great. Well, that's great. I'm not getting any FODMAP foods ever again. That's not the way your body's meant to work. You should be able to eat you should be able to digest because eating and digesting are different. You should be able to digest a broad diversity of foods. And if you can't,
Mm.
why? What
Mhm.
has gone on? What's not working correctly, either above it or below it, that's preventing your body from being able to eat this food in absence of true allergy? Okay. I should
Right.
just caveat that. Changing everything at once, throwing everything in at once is just not going to help us identify what is helping or what is hurting. And then again, I put, expecting issues because our brain is powerful.
Yeah.
So if we are thinking there's an issue there, or if we're just, our bodybuilders going into a reverse, expecting that as they start to push food up, they're going to start to have issues. Well, maybe you're not.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
you manage all these steps ahead, maybe you're not going to have problems. Or just
Yeah.
because some other bodybuilder has problems doesn't mean you're going to have problems.
Yeah, and some of these people might not realize they're making a mistake because they're just maybe not thinking about it in a different point of
Mhm.
view, right? Like when you say changing everything at once, you think about like if a diet's not working well, you just encapsulate in your head that this whole diet's not working for me. I need to just start over, try again, wipe the slate clean. But you don't take your car to the mechanic and they hear a knock in the engine and just say replace every part. They start doing some diagnosing and narrow things down that make more sense. Start listening to where the problem's coming from. So where this relates to the diet is common sense tells me if I'm having issues every time that it's my low day, I start looking at it. Well, what's different about my low day versus my
Mhm.
medium day, or whatever your practice is with your diet? Maybe it's like, hey, I do fine up until my last two meals. So you start looking at the last two meals and saying, one of these are giving me some sort of bloat, some sort of gas, or just kind of an uneasy feel. Feeling in my digestive system. I feel like food's piling up. Whatever it is, starting to kind of narrow the window down is going to help you not throw everything out at once and maybe start identifying things. Like Amy, I'm sure you didn't just throw everything out when you were having issues with eggs. You had to slowly kind of narrow that down and then maybe go a step further and say, well, I got it narrowed down, but now I need to go do an allergy test, or I need to go experiment with some sort of digestive solution first and go from there. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of people can probably relate to that one and say, yeah, that makes sense now. So having a little more patience and really just kind of like you use the same expression I always use, step back and look at the whole picture and see what's going on here as a whole. And that's going to help you just kind of see how everything's working. So that one makes a lot of sense. Did we have another slide or two before I get into questions with you?
Nope, that's basically the end. Yep, my last one was just the, summary. And again, the one other thing that I think should be so important that I really want to stress to bodybuilders out there is diversity. Diversity, diversity,
Sure.
diversity. Like, I know you
Yeah.
love your blueberries, but throw in some blackberries every once in a while.
Yeah.
Like if you're eating a ton of chicken, yeah, like, hey, maybe do some lean pork or get some pheasant or something crazy, get some ostrich, like get diversity in your diet. Like it will
Yeah.
only make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only going to make you a better dieter in the long run, being able to have more tools in your tool belt. If I was silly in limiting myself to my food selections and not exploring other options, I'm going to get sick of even my favorite foods quick.
Mhm.
Just to be pretty basic with that response, but it's true. You want to, diversity is huge. And I've noticed that actually, I've never had problems with my bigger foods. Let's say my carbs have always been quite diverse and my fats and proteins. It's really all the extras that kind of make my meals either pleasant or possibly more digestible too. With
Mhm.
my vegetable selections and my fruit selections, a lot of those things is where I'm getting, you hear the expression multiple colors, make your plate colorful. It's
Yeah, like the
actually
rainbow.
very simple as that, I feel, Jackie always cracks me up because she likes bell peppers, but they have to be a certain color. She doesn't like certain colors. Now, I tell her they're basically all the same. They're just kind of a little bit off on color. You'll learn to appreciate them, but she is funny. I know she has two colors she likes, red things and green. So we have to work with that realm. But it's just there's plenty of options. And you're right. Stuff like you've we've crashed at the same Airbnb multiple times there, and you see I'm always eating with the group. I like my blueberries, but you're right. Blackberries is something I can switch in. I do usually do blackberries and strawberries. I just when I'm traveling, I take
Mhm.
my favorite and just pick a
Yeah.
bag of that. But John Jewett, another great educator, talks about food diversity through his vegetables and through his food, through
Mhm.
his fruits. Something as getting like a vegetable medley or a berry medley are great options, and then you don't have to have a million different things. You could probably find some of your favorites, frozen selections, which are still fresh, if not the freshest, to be honest.
Mhm.
They all work well. So I could second that with you. Anytime I've been able to add food to people's plans, I've done better than eliminating foods for
Yes.
sure.
Yep.
Um, every time.
That's so true. But people want to we seek the restriction, right? People want to think the restriction is the answer when sometimes it's not. Like sometimes it's more. And we're
Yeah,
pretty fortunate, that we have this availability. Like right now, I have a bag of frozen jackfruit in my freezer. Like
yeah,
jackfruit does not grow anywhere near Colorado. But
yeah,
through the beauty of transportation, I'm able to have this awesome tropical fruit in my freezer.
sure. And sometimes the answer to the problem isn't available to be removed. It's just not actually
Mm,
been put in yet, the solution.
yeah.
So, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And if actually there was one thing that everyone's going to benefit from that in a broad scheme of their diets is going to be diversity. I totally agree
Mhm.
with that. Now there's smaller things as we get more minute into different problems and different avenues of fixing digestive problems, but what's a broad range thing we can do is probably be a little bit wiser with meal timing and when we're eating them, and like listening to our body is going to be more receptive of our foods. But diversity, yeah, you nailed it for sure. So I do got
Yeah.
some questions for you. I kind
Yeah.
of half jotted down while we were talking. Some of them are going to be a little bodybuilder related. So let me get this out of the way and let's see if you can help me figure these out. Now, if some of these sound silly to you, Amy, there's a lot of people that are thinking the same thing, so don't mind me.
Nope. Don't
Um,
think they're silly at all.
but when you talked about, you said everything starts in the mouth, and then the enzymatic process after chewing is starts to be the begin. We start with the digestive enzymes we get, and then breaking down a food in the stomach all the way into the small intestines, and then starting to get more absorption further down the line. But I just was curious of, is adding in enzymes going to be digestive enzymes going to be the only thing that can help the enzymatic process of the foods, or what else can we do
Yeah.
to
So
improve that?
there's primarily is being again in the parasympathetic state when you eat is going to help with all of that. So it's going to, and the meal timing. So those two things, if you can be consistent with, is eating in a parasympathetic state and then also getting that meal timing down, because your body is going to start to learn like this is when we should expect to eat. This is
Mhm.
what time we eat. Like these are the things we need to have on hand. Also, making sure that you're getting the right building blocks to actually be producing hydrochloric acid on your own. You've got pepsin, you've got all these things that you actually are getting a diverse enough diet and getting the bigger parts to make them. Supplementation to me is like you talked about earlier, Dave, how you use digestive enzymes only with specific meals and only specific strains for what you're trying to digest. So those are specific use cases where you might be having something that's a little bit more digestively challenging. Dairy is a good example of that, like taking a lactase enzyme when you're having dairy. So those little helpers are great, but if you constantly need them, those are the first couple of things I'd look at is, are you actually chewing your food? Because those are signaling your brain that there is food coming. We need to start getting all the rest of these things, all the little cycle of things, the bile acid, all those things that we need are getting ready also. And then by the time the food gets into your stomach's like, yep, we got this. By the time it gets into the small intestine, gallbladder's right there. It's, pancreas is working, all those things are working. Like, so starting from the top with that one would be really key, not just adding in supplementation.
Yeah. And then that's going to build a better connection too. Like you talk about the brain to the digestive system, the more you allow it to have these signals and like encourage digestion by, you get hungry, you start salivating, you start allowing yourself to enjoy the meal, slow down and eat the meal, emulsify it a bit more. You're just helping those signals kind of play forward and set themselves up for a good digestion, not just chewing your food and saying, I did my job. Hopefully you're allowing a lot of these processes to just be easier to play out. So that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, that made a ton of sense on that one. Because the first thing people think of is supplementation, or they think of some quick solution. They don't really think timing of these things. Like probably the best thing for post-workout meal digestion for me is just being receptive for the meal, being ready to eat. And I've come down to the point where now my routine after training incorporates that. I come home, now I jump in the shower rather than eating first. I'll jump in the shower, get fresh clothes on, take that fresh breath. Maybe I'll put my feet up on the chair and talk to my wife for 5 minutes while we get let the frying pan warm up. And by that time we're ready. Everything's cooled down. We're kind of ready to eat. And it makes a huge difference. It's not something it's not a shaman kind of silly, I don't want to, what could I say, hippy dippy kind of thought process. It's very true. It works.
Yeah.
What about the other thing, dumping syndrome? I've never really I don't think I've actually quite heard of that one. Can you give us an idea of what that is? And is that kind of common or?
It's not in broad population. It's most common in bariatric patients. So when they've had their stomach capacity is extremely reduced, but I mean, this could happen to anyone. But if you have basically overfilled your stomach, so if you are a bariatric patient, your stomach is very, very small and doesn't really have the ability to stretch. You also have had a lot of your small intestine removed. So the distance or the time that's needed for the full transit to take place, like they're malabsorptive surgeries. And the way they're malabsorptive is by limiting the amount you can take in, but also by the ability of your small intestine to absorb. It takes a lot of your small intestine out. So in that case, like I said, when your stomach is either food's been in there too long, or in a situation like that where it's overfilled with food and there's still food coming, well, it starts to panic. And like panic means open it up, let it all out. And your small intestine's like, nope, not what we need. And it just pushes it through really fast. The small intestines and large intestines work through peristalsis, which is, think of like how an inchworm moves. Like it's kind of this little movement like this that pushes stuff along. So that's that signaling. And this is where our brain comes so much into play. Typically it happens at a specific rate. None of us think in our mind, okay, small intestine, inch your way along, keep going. Or can we really tell it to move faster? No, but our brain can't, like through the signaling, it can. So when we're having that situation, that's what happens. Like that, your body knows like food is coming out of us. We don't want it, get rid of it fast. So it literally just speeds up that peristalsis, pushes everything through. You're going to get no real breakdown of anything or absorption of anything. And it's just going to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine, like you say, that now you've kind of set yourself up for a little bit of a disadvantage of all the other steps going past the stomach. We're already not broken down in the stomach enough for it to be receptive in the small intestine. And then that's just going to be a little disadvantage. We want to absorb all of our nutrients. I mean, we count everything to the gram. I might as well expect the same return every time as part of the goal. And that plays out further and further. Well, more importantly, as you get to times of want to look your best.
Mhm.
Um, Unfortunately, I've had to deal with digestive problems closer to shows 9 out of 10 times than I am. There's always the end of the growing scenario where the body's just kind of sick of everything. It's a little tired of the process, but you usually do pretty good when the you don't have everything on the line. It's kind of as you get closer to the shows. And that's
Yeah.
worth asking too, as well as I get a couple others, but I'll ask you about that because I think there's some maybe thought process people can there's some stuff that people could probably improve their digestion as they get closer to the show and food gets limited and water and hydration and fats get low. But we'll hit on that for in a second here. But the other thing I was going to ask is when it came to diversity in food, in your in your diet, when people are formulating their diets, what range are we talking? Like, is it just I can have chicken and rice and olive oil 5 meals, but one of them should be diverse and have a fruit, a vegetable? Or is it one meal of chicken and rice? Everything else should be massively diverse for proteins. Like, where is the middle ground, you think? I know everyone's going to be different, but if you had to say a rule of thumb of like, I would bring in X amount of vegetables, I'd bring in at least two protein selections within a day rather than one. I mean, how would you kind of point people in the direction?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's going to vary, and budgetary considerations, of course, are big here as well. But for me, I would say I would want people to have no less than 3 protein sources a day.
Mhm,
So, and that could be from a lot of things. I mean, if people can do, eggs, Greek yogurt, any of our,
mhm,
animal proteins, even for some people, if they're can tolerate it, doing more plant-based proteins like beans. There are different breakdown of different type of protein, but even mixing in little things like that, or thinking of those things as condiments. So I think of like maybe anything we think of as like a condiment, right? Even like a vegetable might be like our condiment for our chicken and rice meal, switching
sure,
that up at least once a week. So if you do, let's say for whatever reason, you do all your meal prep once a week, you've meal prepped all of your chicken, rice, and broccoli meals where you're going to eat that 3 times a day. Your other meals are different. The next week, switch out that broccoli for something else.
mhm,
Make it spinach, make it, okra, something weird,
yeah,
just that would be what I would say is at least once a week, be mixing out one of your main components
sure. Yeah, that's
just for
pretty
ease.
simple. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's not asking too much. That's probably gonna be, enjoyable too. I mean, I
Yeah.
probably if I do broccoli for a week, I'm ready to do asparagus or ready to do some green beans or
Yeah.
something different, or maybe just bigger salads on the side for the week. So, give you a munch audit me real quick. So today, my meals are very repetitive on my high days. So I have for protein, I had, egg whites and beef this morning, just the egg mates and beef and cream of rice and my berries, no fats. And then I'll have 2 chicken meals with rice and usually sourdough bread because, again, no fats on my high day. And then I have cod for dinner and pre-workout, and then I'll have rice with that and probably some potatoes. I kind of like beefing up those meals a little bit, so I'll probably add some potatoes, and I'll probably do some because my carbs get very high on my high day. So I'll probably do some of the naked juice, like the blue
Mm.
machine naked juice. I kind of like those as well. Not perfect, but it's pretty good. And then dinner after meal five post workout, I'll have actually protein powder, which will be my Ninja Creamy with just some almond milk, unsweetened almond milk. And then that'll be probably my dirtiest of my meals. I'll probably have like, I might have like a little bit of oat square cereal I put in there and just for crunch with the cereal in and then kind of whatever I feel like, to be honest, for the rest of the carbs. Most likely, I always tend to go back to bread. Like I like my Ezekiel bread
Mhm.
and I like my sourdough. Doesn't seem to give me much issues. And nowadays they're taste fantastic and they're pretty low on fats. I mean, I don't see much of a negative, especially Ezekiel I like. And then the only vegetables I'm having today is spinach and some fruits. So I don't know. Is that
Yeah.
pretty
Uh,
diverse enough?
I would say that's very diverse. The only other thing I would say on a high day that you can really utilize is like your tropical fruits, like things that might be a little bit higher in, those higher carb fruits like papaya or
Mhm.
mango, things we might not do on a lower carb day. that's a great
Yeah.
time to add those in. And a lot of the tropical fruits have, not only are they just different, but they also have a lot of digestive enzymes in them. Like
Mm,
papaya, I mean, people will take specifically papaya enzymes. Like, so just utilizing those higher days for, like I call it like splurge fruits,
yeah.
or like melon, like something that just is like different.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll mix in pine sometimes I'll just get a bowl of pineapple to go with some of my
Yeah.
meals. I might even do some banana on the bread at the end of the night, something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Alright, well,
Honey is another great one, where you're getting the benefit, especially if you can get local honey, you're getting the added
yeah.
benefits of the histamine helpers. That also is a very, I mean, you think of what honey is, like it's basically bee spit, so you're getting
Mhm,
a ton of cool like nutrients and enzymes in honey. Like, so that's
mhm.
also something I'd add in on a high day or any day, but like specifically on a high day, I love adding in honey
Yeah.
because it's a
That's
very unique, like specific to your region kind of thing that you can do to help with your immune system specifically. It benefits greatly from honey.
that's definitely me. If anyone knows me and seen my videos, honey is a
Yeah.
staple, quite a bit,
Oh,
and we
it's
do.
so
We have literally, I don't know, not even a mile away from us is a honey farm, or where they do the bees, and they have like a nice little honor system. You just go in, leave your money, take your
oh,
jar.
wow.
It's yeah, it's fun.
Wow.
All right, well, good. I got my audited in from
Yeah.
diversity.
Gold
Um,
star. You're doing awesome.
now, two things I wanted to. These are the last two that are really I definitely wanted to hit on with you. Was one would be food volume. A lot of people get into the positions where when we're dieting and calories are low, we're trying to combat our hunger by using higher volume foods and vegetables.
Mhm.
But there's a threshold to it because we don't want to stuff ourselves with too much broccoli and greens that we're slowing down our digestion or causing constipation or causing too much fiber or just making ourselves uneasy and bloated feeling, walking around all day on low calories but feeling completely bloated is very uncomfortable. Yeah, you might not be quite as hungry. How should people just get a mindset of how do they navigate it? Because they're always going to do that. They're always going to find ways to use food volume as their trick to stay satiated. But how do we not hit that too much is too much scenario? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's where, encouraging that diversity is going to come in. And as a bikini competitor who's been on low food, like I absolutely get that desire, right? I have
Yeah.
wanted to eat 400 grams of cauliflower rice. And like, could I? Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
So but if I'm going for, if I know that my primary goal is diversity, like, well, even if I did that one day, I'm not going to do that every day. So the less you do it, I think the easier it gets to not go there. I mean,
Hmm.
ultimately, when you're hungry and you're dieting, like, yeah, you're going to start doing some of those things. Keeping it to whole food sources and the way you prepare them is going to also help. There's a
Yeah.
big difference between eating 200 grams of, let's say, like riced cauliflower that you've made into like a cauliflower mash and eating that way versus eating 200 grams of raw cauliflower.
Yeah.
Very different digestive outcome. Very
Correct.
different. Or, you'll see, and again, I go back to bikini competitors 'cause that's what I am. So I'm around a lot of them. They'll eat like a whole carton of spinach,
Yeah.
raw spinach, like that's going to have a lot of a different impact. But if you took that same amount of spinach and sauteed it down
Mhm.
and ate it with maybe a little bit of fat, like that's going to change how it digests as well. Ultimately, if you've got someone who's doing that, who's volumizing everything, getting them to do it through whole foods that are properly prepared is going to be number one. If they're doing it through things like low carb frankenfoods, that's gonna
Mhm.
be, like, a real challenge. Those are always gonna
Yeah.
be challenging on digestion. But,
Yeah.
something else to bring up there, like you were saying, you wanna get you wanna get everything out of the food you're putting in, you're tracking it, you wanna get it back out, right? So foods, like, that are using undigestible fats, they're
Yeah.
undigestible. They're gonna travel through. So is that, like, wasted yeah, there's maybe no caloric impact of them, but there's also then no beneficial impact of them. It's just
Mhm.
something that's passing through and, it's not really benefiting your digestion in any way. So rather than looking at them as like harmful to digestion, I mean, looking at them as like, I want to make sure I'm getting everything out of what I'm putting in might be a good way to look at it too. And if you're just eating tons of stuff that's passing through undigested, like I said, with that whole head of cauliflower, if you ate the whole head raw, oh, you're going to see a lot of that coming out in big
Yeah.
chunks,
Yeah.
so that might be a way I'd kind of approach it with somebody, like,
Mhm. So there's
and
going
then
to be a
again, you go
little
back to that.
experimenting from person to person
Mhm.
too, because some might
Yeah.
handle it a little better
Oh,
and
yeah.
do fine with it and really kind of accomplish the goal. And then there's
Mhm.
going to be gluttonous isn't the word, but just silly, just going too far to one end where you don't care. You just want to not feel hungry. You want to feel full,
Yeah.
and you're causing problems where now, like again, yeah, we if we're not digesting and absorbing the nutrients, you're going to get hungrier. You're actually registering less money in the bank at that time.
Yeah.
You're spilling your progress there. You're spilling the nutrients we're hoping to save and take in. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I
Well,
try to put people on like just weight requirements, like cooked food weight requirements, like maximum. So I'll tell people like, we're only going to do 150 grams of this or 100
mhm.
grams of berry with this meal. And I give them the option. So sometimes they might not want to, they might not use it and they don't have to. But I try to give them that option so they know it's at least there. And sometimes we got to be mentally strong and realize that just 2.5, 3 hours around the corner is next meal anyhow.
Yeah. I was actually gonna bring that up, that the mental component of it works in restriction just like it does in feeding up.
Mhm.
You can kind of get in that place where you're so hungry and like you're shoveling in the food because you're so hungry, or you're shoveling it in because you're so rushed, you're just trying to get it over with, and there's another meal coming, you're just trying to get this one over with, so it works for restriction and it works for feeding.
Yeah.
But something that I've always found helpful for me, especially deep into a cut or deep into a prep, is like reminding myself that no amount of food is going to make me feel full,
Yeah.
because it won't.
Very true.
And you know
Yeah.
that from competing. When those ghrelin and leptin signals are off, even if you were to eat the whole bag of cookies, you're not going to feel satiated.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not going to be there. And so like reminding yourself of that, like I need to eat to fuel my goal, and reminding your brain of that too, I think can really be a powerful thing. Like taking that moment to like take the deep breaths, like as much as you're crazy, like starving and want to eat this, like really think about it. Like, what's the purpose of this food I'm eating right now? And is it going to get me to my goal versus is it going to, because even if you give in to those cravings, like I said, that you're not going to feel better, you're not going to feel full, you're going to
Yeah.
feel worse, you're going to be bloated. Like it's not worth the trade-off.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Very good point. And then the one other thing that kind of is in the same kind of rough topic is people having issues with intra-workout nutrition. I guess I'd probably want to just start with mainly just talking about the actual intra-workout nutrition. Like most of us are going to be using some sort of carbohydrate powder and maybe an amino acid blend, or maybe someone's
Mhm.
actually used. Jackie's infamous for her rice cakes, her Rice Krispie treats during her training. Now that doesn't work for everybody, but there's some problems that come about with intra workout shakes in that some of them just don't sit well in people's stomachs.
Mhm.
So I wanted to kind of ask you, when we look at intra workouts, what are we trying to get out of it mainly as a competitor? And what's the best way to just go about accomplishing that goal? Because it's not really a meal. It's not there to satiate us. It's there truly, that's the one calories that we're putting in throughout the day that's serving specifically just the purpose. It's not to give you an opportunity to have Swedish fish or to have a orangey intra shake, something that tastes fun. We're trying to serve a purpose, but people get issues with carbs pulling water to their stomach if they're
Mhm.
choosing maybe a carb powder that doesn't work well with them. Some people still use the waxy mazes that don't sit well in general, I think, for anybody. How do
Nobody.
you look at yeah, how do you look at intra-workout shakes? And if you could come up with one that would be perfect for most people, or a thought process of how to go about getting carbs in while training, is it gonna be pretty much the powders these days is probably best options, or is there a good food option?
No, not for most people. I mean, I think that there's a rare person who can eat and digest and work out at the same time, just because it's two different processes for your body, two very
Mhm.
different things. So what in most cases would happen is if you were consuming like whole food during a workout, is it's either going to sit in your stomach and your body's just going to kind of deal with it until like you are done with your workout, or you're going to get dumping syndrome, which is those you see the guys running to the
Mhm.
bathroom when they're working out, because your body's like, nope, like we need to be working out. Like clearly we are under stress
Yeah.
muscularly, we're trying to build muscle and we get all this food, like get rid of it. And again, then that signal goes to your small intestines to get this food out fast, and it's just going to push through. And then you've wasted that food.
Yeah.
So for most people, if you truly need the intra-workout carbs, I would go to a powder. The other substance I would go to, which works in smaller quantity, like for a smaller person, like perhaps a bikini competitor, a smaller female competitor, even a smaller male competitor, is what I call it hummingbird water, is doing pink Himalayan salt, honey, and lemon just in
Oh, okay.
water.
Yep.
You'd be amazed how easy that is to digest. You've got that little bit of lemon in there to kind of help with the pH, kind of gets, digestively kind of helps break things down in the stomach.
Sure.
The salt, for your electrolytes, and then also the honey for the carbs. And for most people, that's pretty tolerable.
Yeah. I'm going to try that today.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that. That sounds like it'd probably be somewhat beneficial, the digestion from the meal that you just had prior to, like
Yep.
with the honey and a little bit of acidity in the, I mean, a little bit, you're not drinking straight lemon water, of course.
No, just a
But
little bit.
that's a pretty good one. I never actually even thought of that. So honey, lemon water, and some electrolytes, basically.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really good. It gives you that boost of energy. The glycemic index of honey is going to be a little bit lower than like your more simple sugars. So
Mhm.
that's why I said for a lot of people, it actually works really well. It's also really, it's inexpensive and it's not hard to access if you can't get like a really high quality, highly branched cyclic dextrin.
Mhm.
The cheaper options. Oh gosh, like back in the day, like Carboom, and what were some of those other, like you said, the waxy maize. I mean, talk about digestive issues.
Yeah.
Like crazy digestive issues. And again, if you're having these digestive issues during your workout, regardless of the carbs you've taken in, like they're probably not actually helping all that much. Something else that could be beneficial is to add in a little bit of baking soda, like just
Mhm.
like a quarter teaspoon. Like if you are doing like a carb powder or even with your EAAs, like so if somebody's just doing straight EAAs, I always say like do just a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. You won't taste it, but it'll just kind of help balance the pH in your stomach so that you won't, like if people are getting like reflux, right? Because they drink their EAAs and they start to get like belchy or refluxy, it'll stop that
Mhm.
from happening.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great one.
It can also help a little bit with muscle soreness too. Do a little bit of you could do that in your post-workout shake. Also, just do a little bit of baking soda. Like if you do your EAAs right after your workout, throw a little bit of baking soda in there. It can help with muscle soreness.
Perfect. I learn something new
But
every time we talk.
yeah, use caution when you shake it because it fizzes a little because it is baking soda.
Yeah, that's true.
And I
Yeah,
would not add it into the lemon water because then you're going to have a volcano.
yeah, have an explosion.
Yeah.
Well said.
It's a fun gym trick though, like explode your
Yes. Well, that's great. I mean, I think this gives people a pretty good idea of just a little bit better idea and visualization of how the digestive system's working. And overall, it's one of the things that's just, I talk all the time about foundational practices and foundational pieces when it comes to physique building and what we do in bodybuilding as a sport. There's the obvious stuff, right? Some of my answers are sometimes boring on a lot of these lives and podcasts because they're just so basic, because I truly believe that to be true. When people
Yeah.
have certain issues, sometimes it's as simple as a training piece, or sometimes it's just as simple as looking back at the diet. It's not maybe a drug selection or a supplement selection or some crazy exercise that we're not doing that we're not aware of. Sometimes it's these foundational pieces, and digestion as a bodybuilder is just something we have to kind of learn on our own to a bit, or at least have a good understanding of how our own digestion works, because they are different. Mine operates different than Amy's operates different than the next person, and so on. So hopefully this is helpful to people. And if anybody's got some comments, I might as well mention it now. Just anything we missed, definitely drop it in below, and we'll find a time to kind of go over that or elaborate into something deeper if we need to. But are we
Yeah.
missing anything, Amy, that you can think of that we didn't really get to talk on?
No, I think like I said, you can always dig deeper and things can always go farther. What I said when we were at the Arnold, when I said that digestion is usually an easy fix or a lifetime of problems, and that can be for either real physiological or psychological reasons. So don't go looking for a problem where it doesn't exist would be number one. And then like allow your body to be intuitive and like, it's meant to do this. You're going to eat again. This is a process
Yeah.
that happens millions of times a day. You're going to eat again. Like you got to figure it out, but overthinking it is usually not the way to fix it.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, and starting small. I'll reiterate that part. Not making massive adjustments And that's really how I do every aspect of my coaching, from everything we just talked about, from the nutrition, digestion, all the way to the training, to supplemental PED, anything. It's really not big moves, big overhauling moves. It's really just small adjustments, small tweaks, giving time to play out and building the next data of saying, did that work? Did it start steering us in the correct direction? And then you're just going to get better at what you do. You know, if you take a big leap into one direction and now you're completely off, it's like, well, where do I go from here? Do I just backtrack to where I wasn't so good and then start doing the next big move? So I think you're totally right in saying that small adjustments, you know, and not throwing everything out and starting fresh all the time is really a realistic solution. Hopefully this helps people get a little bit better idea if they have any digestive issues that they need to kind of situate. I'm sure you can reach out to Amy as well as myself, and we can at least steer you in the right directions. Are you doing any consultation work for digestion, Amy, and stuff like that?
Yep, I am. Yeah, I work primarily with, lifestyle clients for longer term stuff, but I do a lot of one-offs with competitors. And for the most part, competitors are great to work with because they, for the most part, like you were able to completely recall your entire like daily diet. Like, so it's really easy to pick stuff out and change things when someone's really on top of things. Whereas with a
Yeah,
lifestyle client who's like, I don't know, I eat whatever I see every single day. It's different. Like, I have no idea what I'm eating.
yeah,
So, those are a little more challenging, which is why competitors are great to work with us, kind of just quick consults. Usually it's a few recommendations. I follow up a couple weeks later. We kind of just troubleshoot anything that's still coming up and go from there.
yeah. Yeah, so Amy, I can tell you, Amy would be a great asset for anyone watching that has some issues. And where should they reach out to you? I'll make sure everything gets in the descriptions below.
Yeah, Instagram's probably the easiest place. Just shoot me a DM on Instagram, and that's the easiest way to find me, or leave a comment below, and I will follow up there too.
Awesome. Well, Amy, I appreciate it. And hopefully we can get into there's a few other things that are not as broad. I'd love to jump in with you and just pick your brain at. So everybody keep their eyes peeled. Amy and I, at some point with our busy schedules, will get together and make this happen. I even had to do a podcast at 6 this morning because it was the only time that worked for everybody. So, but we're going to get some more information because I think this is an important thing that I wish I had these resources and people like yourself to talk to and throw ideas around when I was coming through the ranks of bodybuilding and digestion and dieting and nutrition. Now we have all these answers, and sometimes there's too many opinions. You don't know where to go. And yours, I trust, so you get my full endorsement, and hopefully people utilize it and work along with you. So hopefully it does nothing but help everybody out.
Oh, thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate having me on. I'm always happy to help any way I can. And I love talking about poop, so bring it on.
Yes. Oh, hold on. We got Jackie said I have to she's like, you have to pick a poop sound.
Oh.
Like, we went with the gong.
Love it.
We were messing around on this the other night. Anyways, everybody, I appreciate everyone watching. A lot of you that watch my content that is not subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. It does a huge help to me. It's not just motivating and tells me what's catching your eye and what you're enjoying listening to, but I just truly enjoy building a bigger community of people that can just talk about the passions we have in this bodybuilding sport and nutrition and chasing a physique of their dreams. And the more people like-minded we have together, the better off we're going to do. And everyone, so if you're not following, if you're not subscribed, do me a favor and hit the subscription button. And if you are, just go ahead and drop us a comment below. Let us know what you think and hit the like button. All that little bit of support definitely helps big time. And catch up with Amy. If you guys need anything, I'll put all of her information below. And until the next one, everybody be good and grip it and rip it.